Hi there, it's Ian here, and you're watching Grumpy Opinions, the show where I'm going to tell you all about what I think of films, TV shows, games, and life in general. Let's get on with the show. Star Trek Discovery is a CBS show about Michael Burnham and some space dudes fighting an almost but not quite sentient AI called Control. Part 2, yeah. Episode 14, Such Sweet Sorrow, Part 2. I know, yeah, Part 2, that's different. Is the season finale, and it kicks straight off where last week ended, with both ships being surrounded by Section 31 ships, and Control's ready to start the big fight. So everyone's getting ready, and Saru's quoting Sun Tzu, and it's all not looking too bad for them because they've got their big armada of shuttles and stuff. So they launch them all and get ready for the big shooty war. But Leyland's got other plans because he's converted part of their ships to be evil drones, since he's the only life form that's registering on the ship. Everything else is just some kind of AI controlled computer thing. And then it's boom time, and half the Discovery crew are frantically trying to get the suit finished, and jets charge up the time battery, and everyone's going at it, and they start big shooting fighty, and so does the Enterprise. And it turns out that Poe the Queen, she stole a shuttle, and she's doing a bit of good flying, and she's worked out that the key to destroy the enemy drones is to have two ships shooting them from the opposite sides at the same time, because of course she has. Anyway, so she's off doing more shooty booms. And while they're getting all this stuff together in the hallway, some big things fall down on top of them, and it's not good. Stamets gets really badly hurt, so Tilly and Nilsson drag him off to the sick bay to get healed. And Spock and Mike get the suit down to the cargo bay for launch, and she gets into her big angel chute, and he jumps in her shuttle, and then they're off. And the other shuttles fly interference to cover them so they don't get exploded, so they can get all the way up to 88 miles an hour. Anyway, it turns out that while they launched, Leyland beamed over because the shields are down, and he comes into the bridge and does a bit of shooting bit at Michael's vision of the future, but instead of when he killed everyone in that one, he only kills a couple of extras, and then he buggers off to raid the computers and try and get the sphere data that he needs. And it's looking grim for the Enterprise because the other bit of Mike's vision comes true, and a torpedo ends up jamming in the hull of the ship. So they send out weird robots that we've never seen before to do something. I don't know. I don't even know what's happening. But anyway, it's all going to go all pear-shaped. But just before that happens, Klingons arrive, brought by Ash. Ha! Told you that was going to happen. But they also arrive with Kelpians and Baul ships, and one of them's piloted by Saru's sister.
Sarana, you have learned to pilot a fighter.
Yeah, okay, that's kind of how I felt as well, Saru. Anyway. But they can't get the torpedo to go off, or they can't get it to turn off or go away, and the Admiral goes out and shuts the door from the inside, and it goes boom, and that happens. Okay. But meanwhile, Emperor G and Nan are chasing about the ship. They're trying to have a fight with Leyland, doing all kinds of Inception style hallway fights, and then finally Emperor manages to trick him into the spore chamber and zaps him using magnets in the floor, and that turns off all the other control ships and drones because reasons. And while that was happening, Michael and Spock realised they only knew about 5 of the 7 signals that the Red Angel had been leaving, or hadn't, as the case might be. And it occurs to them that actually, Michael doesn't need to go into the future to jump back. She can just do it for now, because it is the future from the beginning of the series. Clever, eh? And then she'll send back the signal and anomalies that aren't in the future. So she does it, and she hits all the moments in the season that, that she had seen the Red Angel, or that we knew about. And then she comes back and drops anomaly 6 there, so that's 6 of the 7. And she says that she'll leave the last one in the future so that, Spock knows that she's okay. And then the disco cranks up and follows her away through the void, and then leaves the Enterprise and Spock behind. And later on at an inquest, everyone does a bit of a wee lie about what happened and said that Discovery was actually destroyed by a spore drive malfunction, and that sphere data was all lost. And Spock says that they should, make talking about Discovery and everything that happened a big treasonable offence. Okay. And anyway, they put Ash in charge of Section 31, which is, odd, but whatever. And finally, Spock looks out from 4 months later from his quarters in the Enterprise, which has been all fixed up. And there's been no signal for Mike, so he's a bit upset. But he quick change in his uniform and a shave later, and boom, he's on the bridge of the Enterprise, and it looks awesome. And then there's a red light in the sky. So then it's back to business for Pike, Una, Nuna, whatever her name is, and Spock, and whoever else is there. And they zoom off into a show that we're probably never going to get to see, and that frankly, I'd much rather be watching. So what did I think? Well, this was the big grand finale of the series, and possibly of the show itself. I mean, we don't know what's going to happen. But anyway, it's in its current state. I mean, the whole crew of the Discovery is now off in space in the future, 850 or 900 years in the future. So it's hard to say what's going to happen next. What's the show going to do now? But I'll talk about that later, what I think. And the fact is, I kind of enjoyed some aspects of this episode, but sorry to say if you're a big fan of it and you really enjoyed it, but this is going to be a pretty negative review. So to change it up, I'm going to dive straight into the bad stuff first, and then I'll get back to my likes and what I think about what's going to happen with the future of the show afterwards, and how I felt about it, overall. So why didn't I like this episode? Well, It's one that had an awful lot of action, a lot of like special effects and everything, and everyone having a bit of a wee moment and tying up like plot lines and continuity and stuff. So that should all be good, right? Well, no, because the show is really clunky as hell. I mean, the writing's self-contradictory, and the stuff just happens because people say so, and in total defiance of like all internal logic and established canon. And when I say that, I mean canon of the show Discovery, not like canon of Star Trek in general, because we're way past the point of caring about that. And I mean all Star Trek. I mean like the films, which are their own continuity as well. But this is just flatly contradicting stuff in season one and earlier in this own season. And obviously, the writers and problems and all the things with the showrunners are probably largely to do with that. But look at it this way. Take last week. Last week, they made a massive big deal about the fact that the bridge crew were staying on board the Discovery with Michael. But this week, it made it look like the entire crew's just still aboard the ship. And since everywhere they went, like there was extras running around and getting killed and stuff, and the sick bay was full of folk who were all injured. I mean, doesn't it kind of lessen the point of that scene in the hallway when they said they were staying, if basically the entire crew more or less needed to stay? I mean, it could be that it was only a skeleton crew, but it was certainly a lot more than the 5 or 6 people who were staying, and apparently none of them have lives or families that they care about. Also, how did Control manage to get killed just by taking out Leyland with a magnet? I mean, that doesn't make sense. That was never established. I mean, surely that should have worked like when they got rid of Gant the other week, because they did exactly the same thing to him. And also, it's such a lazy trope, and it's been done in so many things before. This idea that if you kill the Queen, then all the drones die, and it gets done in everything. I mean, it was done with the Borg in Star Trek before, and it's been done in pretty much everything from the 13th Warrior right up to like the Avengers, and it's lazy, lazy, lazy. And you've got cliches and rip-offs abound in this, as always, because it feels like there's nothing original in this show. I mean, the big fight in the hallway that was nice from Inception, as I said, nice and interesting, but it wasn't anywhere near as good as the stuff in Inception, which is fair enough because that was a multi-billion-pound film or whatever. But the whole thing, the other side of like Michael and Spock flying along and getting protected by the other ships. I mean, if you've ever seen the movie Ender's Game, that's literally a massive plot point from Ender's Game, and it's what they do in that as well. And that's a really good film. You should actually seriously check it out. No, seriously, do. It's a really good film. And also, when Pike touched the crystal, like he got to see the time stuff in the future, and it was told that that was set in stone forever. But this week, Michael was told that what she saw was only a possible future. And what was the point in that? And what was the point in Jet making a big deal last week about how she was going to end up seeing things in the future, and she did, and then literally she was barely in this episode. I mean, did she have a big plot line that was ended up cut? I mean, is this the kind of thing? I can totally see that might be the case, that they might have actually shot stuff for every single character. Because similarly, Poe was barely in this as well. So, I mean, was there a lot more in that, and it's all just ended up on the editing room floor? Possibly, because it was kind of up and down in the editing and everything in this, and the pacing was all over the place. But more practically, the Admiral, she had to blow herself up from when that bomb came. I mean, it's a bulkhead door. Bulkhead doors don't they usually like have a handle on both sides? I mean, they do even nowadays in ships and submarines and stuff. I mean, that was a plot point in like the movie The Abyss and most submarine movies. I mean, you're telling me that spaceships in the future only have a handle on one side? Isn't that a bit reductive and stupid? I mean, why couldn't they have just beamed the torpedo out? Because they never actually said they couldn't. So, I mean, maybe they didn't want to try because it would blow up, but they could have said that. And then why didn't they just boom one of those little robots that suddenly popped up out of nowhere? You've never had them, so why add them in if suddenly it's going to contradict something later? Or maybe beam the handle up, or maybe any of multiple other things other than getting get Ensign Ricky to come in and do it or something like that no one cares about. And if the torpedo also was enough to blow up half the front of the ship, how come Pike can stand and watch it from the other side of that bulkhead door, like through the window, and he doesn't even get knocked slightly or vibrate from an explosion that literally blows a big chunk of the ship out. He just stands there and is like, oh, well, she's dead. Bye. Close the door. And okay, so you're probably thinking, bloody hell, Ian, can't you just enjoy this show? Can't you just watch it and enjoy it? Well, sure. I mean, I could if I turned my brain off, because I'm not actually trying to think about this. I'm not actually sitting there going, think, think, think. What difficult stuff can I find in this to actually point out there's problems with? It's not. This stuff literally just jumps out at me when I'm watching it, like, because I just see it. I just see the problems as they happen. I think, but that doesn't make sense. But you just said this 5 minutes ago and you've contradicted that. I remember last week they said this and now they're contradicting it. It's not because I'm actually trying to find this stuff. I just watch it and I think, wait, what? Hang on, what? And there's character stuff too. I mean, twice in this episode, Mike and Spock just stand around chatting when literally hundreds or like dozens at least of the colleagues are like getting killed or injured, like flying around shooting these ships. And they know they're in a hurry. And they know that like the entire fate of the universe is on the line. But the show wants its wee moments of them looking at each other and lingering and having their tearful goodbyes and stuff. And it just ruins the suspense and the pacing. I mean, so many folk died this week and nobody seemed to care. I mean, there was another thing. Speaking of like random folk, the bit where the main characters all were telling off random extras in a scene.
Pause it automatically. I'll do it manually after each piece is cleared for a second. No, I need a surgical spanner, not a standard engineering coupler.
Stop! Look me in the eyes. The silicone injectors need to be purged after each binding is molded. Watch me.
The bayonet joint on this oxygen sensor is wide open. Are you trying to kill her?
Shit, get off the assembly. I got it. Sorry, Commander.
I mean, Star Trek's supposed to be about people working together, not just the main folk shouting at random low rankers. What was that all about? It was a weird writing move. I mean, maybe, have Stamets do that, because that actually totally fits his character from season 1, but everyone else in the room's doing it as well. I mean, maybe it's supposed to show how hard these people are working and how clever and important they are, and they're so much better at their jobs than all these rando extras that are there, but it just ends up making them look like arses. But for me, the absolute clanger of this week, and really to just put an absolute cherry on the cake of the problems with the show, was the ending. And not the very, very ending, because actually that last scene I quite liked, but the interview scenes. And not only because the scenes just felt a little bit off and a bit rushed, but it also made no sense. I mean, what were they supposed to be telling us here? That the Discovery had blown up? Had it blown up while fighting the Section 131 ships? Because it seemed to make no sense. I mean, how much does Starfleet know? It was really unclear. I mean, Starfleet would surely have logs of the Enterprise, and a lot of it they knew about the mission that they were on. It wasn't a big secret, and everybody knows that the Discovery exists. That's not a big secret because it was heavily involved in the end of the last war, and they were given all medals at the end of the last season, like it was a big ceremony and stuff. And and the whole Michael Burnham, getting forgiven for being a treasoner and stuff. I mean, does nobody know? I mean, did they presumably interviewed most of the officers on the ship? You're telling me absolutely nobody wanted to tell the truth about this? I mean, Starfleet knew about the Red Angel mission, and presumably, there had to be like updates to this at least as late as the Section 31 base. And if you get the whole of Section 31 just got killed, so I mean, presumably they must have told them about that as well, and all the people that died in the battle, because a lot of people died. So why not just tell the truth about Discovery? Oh, we sent it off into the future. They could have said that the Red Angel came from the future and zapped it into the future. That would have made more sense, but no. And it's just the most cat-handed way of doing it and trying to marry up the show with the existing continuity of Star Trek because so many people were upset about that. But instead of doing it in a sensible way or doing some kind of timey-wimey, wibbly-wobbly stuff, which frankly the writing of the show has been of such a way that it would make sense if they did it that way. Now everyone's just banned from talking about Discovery because it's treason. Honestly, it was like 5-year-old writing. It was like writing that a child would just go, okay, and that's it. And I can't even. It's just so stupid. I mean, I could literally talk about this for days and I'd still be annoyed. It would take me forever to get this out of my system. And I don't want this to be that kind of channel. There's so many hater channels out there and they just sit and rag on this stuff and they don't give them fairness and they just find problems with everything. And they didn't like any episodes this season and they're just there to to rattle up and make the people who really hate these shows feel good about themselves. And I don't want to be one of those channels, but I've got to put a pin in this. It was shocking. It was a bad way to wrap up this story. I mean, it was terrible and atrocious. Honestly, never again. I might just not watch any more of this. Oh, and that split screen moment. I mean, honestly, what was that all about? I mean, it's bad enough we've got the vomit comic camera spinning around all over the place like some kind of hyperactive kid who's just had like 10 espressos or something. But then this sudden random bit where there's a split screen. I mean, is this a Guy Ritchie movie now or something? But right, so it wasn't all bad. I've got the ranting bit out of my system a little bit. No, really. But as ever, I mean, the effects, the sound, like the sets and the props and things, and the acting were all pretty much great, mostly.
And I'd like to hear you scream now.
But anyway, I appreciate that they actually tied a lot of this up, even if they did it really badly. And wow, I would pay actual money to see a show about these guys. I mean, just that bit at the end. I mean, number one, played by Rebecca Romijn, and Pike, he's been amazing all season. And the guy who played Spock, he's really grown to me. I mean, he looks a bit funny with his bum chin now, he's shaved his beard off. But hell, I can live with that. That's all fine. And I think this would make a much better show than following the Discovery into season 3 or going off on this Section 31 show that they've been rumouring. I mean, hell, just make a show about Enterprise the Pike years. I think I'd watch that. I think most classic Star Trek fans would love to see that if it was done properly. I mean, you could just have Pike and Spock and Una or Nuna or... I mean, what is her name? I got really confused because I thought he said Una, and I'm sure I've read online that her name's Una because that's a joke because she's number 1 and her name's Una. But the subtitle of the show said that her name was Nuna. I mean, go figure. I mean, I really don't know. I'm just confused. It's fine. It's not a big deal. But anyway, where do we go from here? I mean, overall, Discovery has been, in my estimation, an example of an amazing, technically brilliant production. let down by problems at the production level with like the management and the writers' room and the showrunners, and changing it all about and changing the direction and changing their overall like plan for how the show's going to go, and racing to catch up with things like Orville and stuff like that early on, and not really finding its own voice. And I think that part of the problem is that a lot of the writing's about moments and beats rather than an ongoing story that makes sense. And if season 3 happens, I mean, looking forward, then it could still be about the Discovery, but in the future. And that could actually be a good thing, because at that point, it might not even really be Star Trek anymore. I mean, it could basically be a post-Federation show way in the future, and completely different aliens and completely different timelines, and just move everything totally. And it could be a show about these future peeps in space in a ship that's got a spore drive that they can bounce around. They basically don't have to pay any attention to like any of the stuff that's happened in classic Trek. You know, the Federation might be gone, the Klingon Empire might be gone. You can use some of the same aliens and that, but basically just do your own thing. And it reminds me a little of like the end of like one of the seasons of Doctor Who. They got the character of Clara out of there, and I think it was Hellbent it was called, and they had Arya from like Game of Thrones and Clara going off like to be basically immortal, cool women in space with a time machine. And it clearly felt like at that point, it suddenly registered in my head that basically everything Moffat had been doing for the last 2 or 3 seasons made it clear that he was much more interested in making that show than he was in Doctor Who. Because everything he kept doing, and kept having lots of really strong female like companions and stuff, and having them doing cool stuff in space, and you had River Song, and you had all these sort of stuff, and then suddenly set up for what looked like an amazing spin-off show that he wanted to make, but then they didn't make it for, I mean, presumably because she went off to make The Crown, and then the other one was off to make Game of Thrones. But anyway, I mean, here we are, and I'll say it. I mean, that big elephant in the room thing about the whole show being very like female orientated and being full of strong female characters, but like way more than actually, probably a show like Star Trek would usually do, and it just feels really obvious that they're doing that, and sometimes feels a bit clunky. I know some people have been saying that, oh, I'm only reading into that because I'm just used to the previous status quo. The fact is, Discovery, it really does push forward a thing about strong women, in it, and strong women in space doing cool things, and that's all good. And if it was written better, I wouldn't care. I mean, if it was actually done so that it felt like these people actually had good characters and fit together in a good way. But it's all been so Mikey-centric that it didn't really work that way. And hopefully if Discovery Season 3 can divorce itself from like the trappings of like Star Trek and like the confinements of that, it can go off and be its totally own thing and just be about the characters and give them all like real character arcs and things to do and stuff and life. And I think that would be cool and that'd be great rather than like, anything feeling forced and clunky. But anyway, we'll see what happens when it happens. But I might even just be done with it and not bother. I mean, the thing is, there's other shows out there. I mean, The Orville might have its bad moments and moments of stupidity, but it's overall a much more enjoyable show, and the characters I've actually grown to care about far more than the ones on Discovery. And there's still shows like The Expanse and Night Flyers on, and you could watch them if I want a bit of a sci-fi space fix. But I'll see what happens. But wow, I mean, Discovery has been a show. Not a good one. One with decent moments, but mostly bad ones, in my opinion. And it's time to move along. So I hope you enjoyed this ride and this little dip into like Star Trek for this season. And I hope you'll stick with me for the rest of the Game of Thrones Season 8 episodes and whatever I end up talking about after that. So please drop me a comment below and tell me what you thought, because no one's ever wrong, and I actually really like engaging with it and having conversations about it. And it really also helps the channel grow, if you comment and if you subscribe, and definitely if you share it online on Facebook or Twitter or whatever. And follow me please on @GrumpyOpinions. So till next time, I've been Ian, and these have been my grumpy opinions about Star Trek Discovery.